Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to the Queer Vision Pod. I am Koee Starr, or Koee of Nekalon, and this is...
Hi, I'm Becca.
And we are the co-founders of Queerlina.org. You can find us at Queerlina.org on Instagram, YouTube, Blue Sky now,
And TikTok.
and TikTok, which we never post on, but
We'll
get there. Today we sat down with Alex the Rabbit, Alexandria Webb, and we talked ballroom, drag, the intricacies of that. We talked about
what it is to be a woman.
Yeah, what it is to be a woman, a Black trans woman, and her work with sexual assault victims, transgender sexual assault victims, and sexual assault victims as a whole. She genuinely is such a sweet soul, and I'm so glad we got to sit down with her. So keep watching. Hello, Alex. How are you tonight?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us and sit down and just talk about your experience in community and everything.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So just to give you a little introduction, I know we've we've crossed paths, but this is my co-founder, Rebecca. She has co-founded the Queer Vision in Carolina with me.
Oh, that's me.
Hey.
Yeah, so I guess we can just jump right into it. If you just want to tell the viewers, a little bit about you, who you really are, and your pronouns, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm Alexandria Webb. I'm like, where do I start? I grew up near Wilmington, so like Whiteville, if y'all know where that is. Out in the sticks, and then I moved to Chapel Hill. Went to school there in 2010. And then I graduated from there in 2014. And then I started doing drag at Chapel Hill back when people were not doing drag at Chapel Hill. I remember I had I don't know if y'all know if y'all had like a little school post, but we called ours the convention board, and I performed in the pit one day. It's like the center of like campus, and oh my god, in the most horrible little wig, and a golden black chevron dress, and the people ate it up, but yeah, I've lived in the area since like 2010. My pronouns are she, her, and yeah, I've identified as a trans woman since 2016. And I've just been a little girl working in the world. Currently, I work for Orange County Rape Crisis Center as the LGBTQ advocate. So I just help LGBTQ clients who are in crisis from sexual assault, connect them to resources. And currently, I've started a program called the Cutie Pox Survivor Advocates Institute, where I trained a cohort of 14 Black and brown trans folks in the past, and I'll be picking up a new cohort of 10 folks to train to be community advocates, because as we know, with the upcoming administration and whatnot, a lot of formalized support that trans folks would be able to receive will be taken away from us, but we still need folks in community to connect folks to those resources that are there.
100%.
So by being community advocates, we can get our folks connected to those resources, because we're the ones that need them the most.
That's amazing. I had no idea that you were so like involved in the community in that way anyway. So that's amazing to like hear, and I applaud you too, because I can imagine that is hard work for sure. It has to be a lot,
Yeah, it is hard work. But also I think it was just like being a friend to someone, or just being being the support that I wish I had when I was going through my experience of sexual assault. And so yeah, just being that person that's like, hey, there's a number that I know of that you can call, or if you need to flee and get into a hotel for the night, here's a place where you can get to those resources. And trans women Specifically, we unfortunately lose our lives to domestic violence at unprecedented rates. So being able to connect that loophole in the cycle of our journey, and instead of folks having to run to their mothers or their sisters and receiving support from folks who really don't know how to handle that. And my mother, my sisters, they did a phenomenal job for supporting me when I was going through what I went through. But yeah, now that I have the formalized resources, I'm like, if we all just knew of a couple of numbers, instead of being like, suck it up and go beat his ass or something like that, we can actually have support in these cycles and can close those, instead of being like, we'll go beat his ass. Beating his ass might still be appropriate, but I can also get some therapy, or I can have a support group to support me in my healing afterwards, instead of just having to continue on with life.
So, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been in that kind of field, like working with like domestic violence and the queer community?
Yeah, I'm coming up on a year and a half of working in the formalized support role. Probably all around. I started as a consultant two or 3 years ago, where I created a cohort of about 14 folks. And yeah, when I created that program, I hadn't thought of like the community aspect yet. I was more so like, well, look, Black people need to get paid because they're Black. So that's where it kind of started out as. But then as I was doing the work, and like folks are always not including trans folks in conversations. So people are always like, well, we would if we know where they are. And I was like, well, y'all know me, so I know where they are. I know where the girls are. So by being able to connect that community piece, we were able to like see what folks wanted in community out of like nonprofits and stuff like that. And in addition to like direct relief, folks are already kind of doing this, folks are already kind of doing this work in their roles. And like my mother, Kimora Brooks, people disclose to her all the time, and we're always like, well, what do we do, what can we do to make that better? Fortunately, being folks in community and being like really, I guess, on stage and whatnot, so you're kind of like the gateway for folks to experience like their true selves. And that was how it was for me. I remember looking at Dana St. James on stage at Legends all those years ago, and she did, what was it? Was it California Girls, or no? What was it? That's What Happens When You Wake Up in Vegas. That song or whatever.
Right.
In like big old costume, but still, like that was my first time I had ever seen like a woman or a trans person, just live and have fun on stage. And I think for so long, especially growing up in Whiteville, you see like depictions of trans people in the media that aren't so like friendly. You don't get to see positive representations of yourself. So it wasn't until I came to college where I saw Dana St. James and I saw Kimora Brooks in the most worst lit bar possibly. And I was like, oh, I can also live and be my most truthful and authentic self. But I think that's the beauty of being on stage and whatnot. People see that and they're like, oh, well, I too can. Oh, if this person is living, then I too can do that. Now, sometimes we don't talk about the struggles of getting to being comfortable living like that, but.
And that's what I think, like, that is the true essence of, like, drag and performing art. I think, nowadays it definitely has gotten, which I don't know if you feel like this is a shift that maybe you've seen. I haven't been, obviously, in the scene nearly as long at all. But, like, I definitely know these days it can be very competitive. Do you feel like that's something that's changed over the years more? Like, leaning more competitive, or it's always been this competitive?
People are nicer now. People are a lot nicer. Yeah, I remember. I mean, people. I think back in the day, or at least from my experiences when I was coming up as an undergrad in college, like I came up along the time frame of like Chloe Cassidy and I started around the same time. Right. Right. So I just aged myself, but but we came. I think we're the same age, but we came up along right around the same time, and we were like really one of only like two black girls that were doing drag, or two black girls that were getting booked. I mean, especially on Flex's stage, you like there was a, I can't remember her first name. Sorry. Long time in the scene, y'all. You started.
No, a lot of girls.
We always called her Chocolate, and she was really friendly. Like I'm telling you, like back in the day when we did drag, if someone saw you doing drag and they were like, "Oh, well, you kind of got this," they'd be like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna take you home. I'm gonna feed you some food. We're gonna do some drag, and we're gonna do all this stuff." I remember I did Legends First Friday, and they love telling black girls they look like Janet Jackson, but someone was like, "You look like Janet Jackson. I think you can go the distance." And they sent me a check for $300 in the mail, like So like in terms of like pageantry and stuff like that, like people really believed in pageantry, and if they saw you doing big drag and stuff like that, they really wanted to fund it. I don't think people do a whole lot of that these days, or like. Now we have the competitions and whatnot, which I think are fun and I think is great and everything. There's more opportunity because truly like doing drag in 2011 or 2012, like we didn't have these bookings. Like it was just Legends. That was the only place you could go to, and they definitely didn't book trans women at that time. Well, they kind of did, but you always had to win a pageant. It was always about winning a pageant, and of course, like it was very. I remember back then the industry was so white dominated. So like for me, learning how to do makeup was so hard because it was white women trying to paint me. You know what I mean? So I was trying to learn how to paint as a white woman, and it just never worked out for me. But
I think that's so, like, I don't know, something that's so crazy that I know it's definitely happened throughout history. Just like being the fact that like drag was really funded or not funded, like started by black trans women, the majority of the gay rights movement. It's so irritating, to see people not credit that enough. And then like.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny, it's two of our most iconic trans women, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, like both died in and they died in a time where Wall Street was booming and these gays were running it up on Wall Street, and these gays could have done something to make sure that these women were not sleeping on the streets,
Yeah.
I just think about that, and there's a scene in Pose where two of the girls tried to go into a gay bar, and they were like, "We don't want your kind here." Mm-hmm. And so I just think about that history, and I'm like, when people think about transphobia in the gay community, I don't think they think of it as something as like, oh, it just goes as deep as like the stage. But I'm like, no, gay folks literally excluded trans women from their spaces and still do.
Yeah.
They just do. I feel like they try to be more sneaky about it these days, but whatever.
That's definitely something I even noticed. Like, as I know, like when we first met, so I've definitely had my own journey with gender, and I was more on like the trans femme side, and I was definitely presenting more as a trans woman. These days, I am more like gender fluid, gender queer, kind of just like flowing through the motions. Like some days I look masc, some days I look femme. You get what you get.
Okay.
But I even like the time that I was perceived as like a trans woman and presented that way, it's just such a difference. Like people are like, okay, like can get on board with drag a lot more, but then it's like when you say you're a woman, it's like the hate almost seems like 10 times harder. They're like, oh, you can dress up, but like you think you're a woman? Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like that. I remember we used to say pink and blue queens, And I remember before I even knew what that was mean, people were like, "Oh, she's one of those pink queens," and I was like, "What does that mean?" They were like, "Oh, you gonna be one of the girls one day, one of these days." And I was like, "Oh, okay, work." And then I was like, "I think you're wrong," but then I ended up being one of the girls. So, people read you down, but yeah, I remember it was it went from being like a fun thing, like celebrated to like. But I don't know. I think sometimes my theory is it's rooted in like something about attractiveness. Like when people figure out that they can no longer like have access to your body, they're like, because I feel like that at least for my journey, that's what it was like for me when people realized that like I was no longer the thing that they wanted to fuck anymore. They were like, the gigs were shutting down, the after parties were shutting down. I was like, well, damn. I remember it. Like showing up in a skirt for the first time to Legends, and people were like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, but if I got a full face on and all this and whatnot, it's okay. But I can't just present how I want to present on my downtime, you know." So yeah, it's definitely a switch, and yeah, I think in terms of like the real world implications of that is just, it is harder to just exist as a trans person, and especially when you're like first figuring yourself out, because you don't know what the hell you want to do. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I'm trans, and then you got your trans mother over here that's like, you need to wear skirts 24/7. And you need to go to work dressed up, and I'm like, but babe, I'm not comfortable with that, And
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh no, go ahead.
What I was even gonna ask was like your experience, with the harsh gender norms of like femininity and like feeling as a trans woman like that you have to like always be on 10, or like the makeup always has to be done, the hair always has to be done. Like I definitely know, like in my experience, it was very much like that. So I guess I was just curious to hear your side of that, because I know you kind of touched on it with what you were saying.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Like, so just being a Black woman, I think my touchness with like, and especially like a Black woman in the country, like, makeup and like what people think is like attractive has always been like ever evolving for me. Because like in the country, like we didn't like makeup. We didn't look at makeup. We don't look at makeup like that. And like, you gotta have like, I think we always prioritize the natural girls, or natural girls in the country. And so like it's a complete different switch up where like I feel like when I did come up here, people were like, "Oh, you need to be like people are done up 24/7." And that's not even just, I think that's most women are.
Yeah.
I remember when telling people that I was starting to transition, they were like, "Well, you need to have your nails done. You need to have your hair done. You need to have your toes done 24/7." And like a lot of that stuff has like picked up and stuck with me. A lot of those things I'm still like breaking myself. Like, this is the first time I've ever worn my natural hair out. Like, I don't do that.
Yeah, I've seen you wearing it out. I've been living like.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I've never done that before. So yeah, I think it's just a real big journey, like finding yourself and what, like, I also think Ballroom helped me kind of find like my authentic version of myself, because I think the thing is that in Ballroom realness, when people say realness, realness doesn't always necessarily mean done up and looking cute, and you get docked for that in Ballroom. If you like, say for instance, if the category is school realness, and you show up looking like you are not about to go to school, you show up looking like a Britney Spears video, they're gonna be like, "Oh no, that's not realness." Their version of realness is showing up in public and not being clocked. So like, sometimes that doesn't require over the top makeup or your titties out or whatever. So I think for me, I had to to find my own version of realness. Um, I had to just really just play with that and realize that like masculinity is a trope that's used against Black women all the time. My mom, who's not even remotely trans, gets called a man all the time. That's the number one thing. I can remember her talking about that, and that's what people do.
I will say it's interesting to hear you say that because like I feel like you guys are talking about an experience that you guys kind of have somewhat in common, and so like that obviously I've never experienced this. I'm a cis woman, and so like hearing you say that though, I'm like, whenever you said that you felt like you had to be hyper feminine, or like they were saying that you had to act a certain way to be a woman, I was like, Koee and I had literally just talked about this at one point recently, where like I am a cis woman and I am like passing as a woman, right? And I still feel if I go out in sweats and a t-shirt, I'm going to be seen as not girly enough too. So it's like that's that womanhood. Like we are connected because either we're too feminine and we look like a bitch, or we look like we're trying to be a model, and so of course that's not real. We don't like you, or you look too masculine and we don't like you because of that. It's like it's all based off the attractiveness that you were talking about. Where it's like if you look like you're a dyke, they're going to say that, and it's like, okay, thanks, but they don't mean it in that kind of way, of course. Like no matter what, if they think that you're unattainable for them, it's a problem. And my question to you is, do you think in the trans and drag world that this is also something that like trans men and drag kings have to go through as much? Do you think that they're more accepted, less accepted? What do you think it is for that? I mean, I know you might not know, but
I think that's a good question. I think that's a really good question. I think trans men have a unique set of experiences that they have to worry about because there's obviously fetishization. And I mean, obviously, you get fetishized as a trans woman, especially as a Black woman, like trans woman as well. But you see sexual violence rates go up with trans men.
You mean in relation to trans women, or like
in just in relation to sexual violence in general? Like you see, like the highest number of folks being like sexually assaulted are transgender men.
That's insane. I'm so glad that you actually brought that up because I don't think a lot of people would have thought that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a small community, right? So if one person gets assaulted, that sends up the rates astronomically, right? But I think in general, obviously you see more like Black trans women being murdered, or just experiencing brutality in that nature. It's like I call it social brutality. And you see that outward hate and whatnot. I think we're also experiencing a unique period in our culture where like trans men and their issues are being like are swept under rugs. I mean, it's just natural that when you are in a position of questioning, like, or figuring out what masculinity is, and you're putting yourself around like people that say that they see you as a man and they don't, they take advantage of that, and it's unfortunate. But it's the sexual assault rates for trans men is staggering, and obviously, like, I don't want to speak too much on that because like it's not my experience, but when people, it is. I think so often we are like trans women are so sensationalized in the media and whatnot, and I think trans women, like when people think about trans women, there's that automatic notion of, oh, she's lying, like she's not a woman, she's lying. And I do think that is because of the masculine dynamic. I think stepping into womanhood, people don't understand why you would give away privilege. And so when you're stepping out of that privilege, that's a whole, I remember the first time I was at a meeting and people didn't listen to me. Like, before living in male privilege, I could say something and you didn't have people trying to paraphrase it afterwards. Now, whenever I say something, and thank God I'm in the office that I am right now, but when I worked in sales, I remember saying something, having an ideal, I would say it, and then a male cohort would paraphrase it for me, and regurgitate it, and oh, this was the smartest idea we've ever had. You know, I remember that happening. So I think there is I do think there is a privilege of transitioning into maleness or manhood for masked folks or being perceived masked. Because I think they're just, I think sometimes they're just allowed to exist because you can't just like, it's okay for a man to just wake up with hairy legs and I might ask for a sniff, but you know. But you know, like for womanhood, it's like I'm so self-conscious about having hairy legs or whatnot, and just wearing basketball court shorts because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get clocked. Like they're gonna see hairy leg, oh, I'm getting clocked. Oh, hairy arm, clocked. You know, I just think about all that stuff. Or like even when it comes to like voice, and when going back to that conversation about like bodily autonomy, because I think that's what we have in common with cis women, but I don't think we think of it like that. I think it all comes back to a conversation of bodily autonomy, and what people think is acceptable for your body and those norms and existing within those norms or without those norms. I used to resent especially cis women that used to be like, well, you need to have your nails done and your hair done. And I'd be like, well, where are your nails? You know, I used to resent them for that. But then I also had to think that like these women are also victims of this patriarchal society where they're told that they're not good enough for just simply existing.
Yeah, and there's that power dynamic of, well, we're like in the hierarchy, it's like white men are up here, and then like white women are here, and like cis women, right? And then it's like, well, now we're realizing that like, oh, you're trying to be an equal footing of me. Okay, I got to bring you down a notch. Like it's like you can see it in so many different ways, but it's that I have a little bit of power and I want to keep that little bit of power. I want to keep that little bit of privilege. So I'm going to tear you down as much as I can to make you feel weak so you don't stand up to me, instead of, oh, let's recognize the things that we have in common, like the fact that we feel like we're not good enough and the fact that we feel like we're not pretty enough and we feel like we have to do so many things just to go out and exist in society. Let's bond on that. No, can't do that. Have to tear you down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the whole thing that like folks like to say that like, oh, especially for trans women, they like to say, oh, I'm natural. Like, well, at least my body's natural. What is it? We can have this conversation. What the hell is natural for a woman? Like, there's women who don't have children. There's there's women who don't have, you know, this one might be controversial, but there's women who don't have vaginas. I myself is one of them. There are women who are born with beards, who have beards. There are all types of women. You know, the conversation of what is natural in the human spectrum of bodies is, I think that's such a funny conversation because nobody is natural. Our bodies all do something a little funky. I know mine does.
Like makeup.
Yeah, like
wearing eyebrows. It's like, come on, like no one fucking cares. Like you can wear a full face, great.
Yeah,
not wear a full.
I mean, unless you're Denise Richards, I don't think anybody wakes up perfect. But I'm sure even she has her days, you know. But she's pretty. She's gorgeous. So I don't know.
So circling back to like your experience with drag, and you said ballroom as well. Did you start with drag first and then get into ballroom? Was ballroom first? How did that kind of
definitely started with drag first, and I mean it's kind of hard to get into the ballroom community. And I wouldn't say that like I'm like 100% immersed into it, even though my mother is like an iconic ballroom figure. Like I would walk more balls if I had like a car, but
real.
Right. But I think just I wanted to see that culture in Raleigh for so long. And like I think that's the unique thing in ballroom about being a trans woman is it's the one space that I feel respected in when I just walk through the door. Um and I think that's because I think Black queers we'll talk about a place that I no longer work at anymore. I remember working there and going there, and it was always a fun place. It was always a fun place for white queers. I will never doubt that. But I remember it being a very unsafe space for Black folks, and I remember being that girl that's like, oh, I'm gonna change the culture, and that is what started me throwing balls there and just throwing balls in general. And that's what led to a deeper connection and relationship with Kimura and just meeting ballroom fathers and figures in North Carolina community that are iconic and that foster those communities. And I think that's the thing about it is the message is if you don't feel like you're good enough, you can always come back to the next function. And I love that message because I'm a girl who doesn't like to be told no. And in ballroom, nobody's telling you no. They're just telling you to try harder. And I think that's I think that's a message that's held up in Black community where you might fall on your face today, but tomorrow you can get back up. And we as a community, that's the thing. They're not going to just tell you no. I remember, being in white spaces and I have been told no so many times and people there was no way for growth for me. But I remember when Kimura came up to me and was like, when Kimura and Jackie Knight, it might have been rough. Jackie Knight is another legendary trans woman in community. You can see her at Flex on a Thursday night, in the back corner, in that little cubicle back there. But I remember doing a show one night, and she was like, "Look, we need to tweak a couple of things because you could be the it girl if you wanted to be. If that's what you want, you could be that." But she was like, you can't trust everything that these white people tell you because they're gonna sit up here and smile in your face and laugh and kiki. They're gonna laugh and kiki with you, and then they're gonna go behind closed doors and laugh and kiki. And I just think about that being the scene for like Legends drag. Like, yes, you can go to Legends on a Saturday night and be celebrated, but you don't know if they're laughing with you or at you, Yeah, that's just the thing with like ballroom community, like and just like the nature of a chop, like chopping folks, like this person, the category called for Bizarre Runway, and they had like a gorgeous outfit, but the runway was not giving couture. It was not giving America's Next Top Model. It was not giving. So you look great, but when it came to the technical point and comparing that to other people, you didn't have that. But instead of just chopping that person, we pulled her to the side and was like, hey, this is why you got chopped. This is why. Work on your runway. Go watch America's Next Top Model. God forbid that show ever exists again. But go watch some clips of the runways and look at what Miss J is saying to these people, heel to toe or whatever. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's the reason why we have so many categories in ballroom, or why ballroom even came to exist is because Crystal LaBeija didn't win a pageant because of this other white queen, and she knew that she had the best look. Everybody else knew it around her, but when it came time to judge, they gave it to a white woman, and she knew that she had beat her. She knew her package was better, so this is why she said, instead of trying to be celebrated by these white folks, I am going to create my own system. I'm going to create my own culture where folks can be celebrated. And that's the thing that I love about categories such as realness. And it's even transformed into gender nonconforming realness. You have that as a category now. And there's so many categories now. It used to be just realness, and you had to be, you know, whatever that category called for realness. But I think that's the overall message of just being celebrated for who you are, what you want to be, and not everybody can walk every category. I think that's the thing. Like people see a face category and they think like, oh, I've got a beautiful face. Not everybody that has a beautiful face wins face. You know, it's about selling your natural attributes, your confidence, even. And you know, in ballroom, you gotta let the category choose you. Just folks will they'll literally come pull you out the crowd and be like, "Go walk this."
Yeah.
And it just sometimes it just takes that push.
I also like. I love that it is so community, and I feel like in drag there is some of that, but it definitely does feel like from what you are saying that it's more like there's more explanation, you know, and especially just like being able to be in a place where it's like you don't have to worry about that like racial injustice, you know, that does happen so often. I could only imagine is so liberating to like, you know, walk in the door and be like, okay, this isn't even going to be a factor. Like this is the last thing that's going to be thought about. Because in every other space, the sad reality is like that is probably a thought that is always, you know, crossing your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like just my experience with racism and whatnot in this area, yeah, I think folks just really don't realize. I don't, either folks are just so complicit in the ways that they are like perpetuating racism, or they don't care. That's what I think about it now.
It's both.
Yeah, I think it's both. But I remember a time where, like, you know, especially during COVID, where folks were realizing that like one drag queen, one queen of color on the bill was not okay, and now we're back to that. You know,
what
but yeah.
exactly is the difference between drag and ballroom? I'm here. I'm like
you
I'm
probably
new to
don't
the world
know.
of everything. If I'm being honest, because I don't like crowds, and I don't go after 6 o'clock. If I'm being honest. But also like now that I'm kind of getting into this a little bit more, like I've been to a couple drag shows mostly because we put them on. But I'm hearing that there are like categories, and I'm hearing community. Aside from that, I don't know the difference.
Yeah, that might be good for the
Yeah, so ballrooms are judged functions. Usually the panel is folks in community who have like been bestowed like iconic titles or whatnot. We don't really have a lot of icons that live around here. And like when I say like icons and legendary, like these are specific titles that are bestowed to you. Like there's a ballroom, there's like the Carolina Ballroom Awards, the New York Ballroom Awards and stuff like that. And so like when you talk about the community, like you work your way into the community to be a legend or to be an icon or what have you. So whenever you hear people being like, "Oh, you're legendary or you're iconic," no, you're not. Because you didn't win that. You were not bestowed that title. So it's actually appropriation of language. Also, femme queen. You know, when people like, "Oh, I'm a femme queen," that's appropriation of language. Like femme queens are trans women that walk balls. So unless you were a trans woman that walks a ball, you are not a femme queen. You're not a butch queen unless you are a gay male that walks a ball. You know, these are specific terms for specific things. And yeah, so when you think about ballroom, like ballroom is a specific community. It started out in New York and then just kind of like trickled down to all places. I mean, you have people throwing balls in Paris now. But you have categories like Vogue, you know, the performance. That's a performance category. Face. That's where like when people, oh, you're serving face. That's where that came from. Is ballroom. Face is a category in ballroom where you like you're walking face with other femme queens. You know who has the best face. That one's a little bit more self-explanatory. Runway. Who has the best runway? All American runway. You can get really specific into the category. European runway. You can get really specific into the categories. Bazaar is even a category. So bazaars, and they all have specific, like, a bazaar category will normally look like this: serve a bazaar look. Or, like, you have your themes. Like, when we threw the superhero ball, our bazaar category was like, serve a look like you're about to save the world from an intergalactic evil. And it's those things that, like, spark that creativity. I can't do bazaar because I would like to think I'm creative, but when you see what these people got going on, it's a whole different world.
A question that I've heard in the community a lot too is, so since Ballroom is such a Black centered space, and it was created to get away from that discrimination and stuff from white folk, do you feel that it is appropriate for white people to be in balls? What is your
hell yeah. I think that's the thing. I think it is appropriate for white people to be in balls, but I also think it's one of those things of, like, baby, if you come in there cutting up a clown, and you try to walk a category that's not right, or you act disrespectful, you're gonna get handled. So you need to come very, I always tell white folks who are curious about, just like I tell anyone who's curious about walking Ballroom or doing Ballroom, watch some videos. Specifically watch the category that you want to walk. Like, if you are looking at a ball and you see bazaar and that's calling to you, go on YouTube and specifically look up people walking bazaar. If you want to walk sex siren, look up people walking sex siren, because it might not be what you think it is. Like, people think that, and that's, for me, like, my category is sex siren, just because I'm thick and juicy. But for me, I used to think that sex siren was like slow, seductive movements, all that stuff like that. When you see legendary sex sirens, it's all about the jiggle. It's all about the body movements. It's all about they want the hair to move. They near naked as possible. It's all about that. It's all about selling that. It's not about doing that slow. I remember I did that, got chopped, and I was like, oh, I have to think about, like, what is sex siren? Like, oh, this is a category that has history,
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that people have to realize, is that there's a history to these categories. So you really have to do your work. It's like homework. You have to do your homework. And I think that's the thing with drag, like, with drag, you can be whatever you want to be, and you can get booked for whatever you want to get booked at in drag. But it's in the similarities of pageantry is that this is a space for you to grow.
So it's a little bit more about, like, choosing. I wouldn't even say, like, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't say, like, putting yourself in a box, but just finding, like,
your niche.
Yeah, your niche and where you sit, instead of, like, drag is just more like a free flowing art. This is more like turning that art into a little bit of a skill set as well.
Exactly. And you have some people you do have your people, like, you do have your people that will go in the bathroom and change outfits and come back and walk another category. Now, God bless those people's kneecaps, but those girls exist. And they are not weak ones, but if you want to be legendary, if you want to be iconic, if you want to sell legendary face, if you want to sell iconic face, you need to hone in on that, because it does take skill to hone in on that. Cause it's like America's Next Top Model. I remember one of those girls, her name was like UV or something like that. And she looked like a little fish, and she wasn't like the prettiest thing in the world, but when she took a photo, baby, So I think of it like that, like, if you know your angles.
I think that's so, like, a big thing in performance art in general. Like, it's really more about standing on that stage or wherever you're at and, like, bodying, and really being in that moment. I feel like way more than, like, if everything is all perfect and put together. And I think people often get that confused, and they want to focus more like, oh, well, if I have this nice outfit or this nice hair, like, it's like, what are you really serving when you get up there? Just
yeah, it's you can have the nicest outfit, but someone might beat you because they have just a little bit more personality than you, or they might have read the category a little bit harder. And I think it's all about the intention and what you set into the intention. I found myself being much more intentional in ballroom spaces than drag spaces because, with drag, I was always told you can be whatever you want. So I think it's hard for me to find what an aesthetic that I like or what makes me happy with drag sometimes. But I think that's also just that's the journey of any person, just natural. Look, I didn't even know what style of clothes I liked until 2 years ago, and I'm 32. So, I think that's just the evolution of any person. You're constantly evolving. But if someone gives you a script, I remember hell, I can't write now, but those little prompts in high school, baby, it was chewing those little short stories up.
Yeah, I love a good and see that is it's such a double-edged sword, right? Just because you want to have creative freedom, but it is nice to have kind of a basis to jump off from and be oh, okay, I can take this thing however. So I definitely feel that. Was there? I know you touched a little bit, on your work with trans, victims of sexual assault, and I know that was something you wanted to touch on. Was there anything else within that work that you wanted to speak about? Anything a message you wanted to give to anybody? Just anything you felt still called to say on that?
Yeah, not too much. I won't speak too much on it, but I think when people say that we're in an epidemic of trans women losing their life to violence, I think people don't really understand what that looks like or how that is. And I think that because our society is so willing to blame trans women for their deaths, because the natural assumption is that we're tricking or whatever, I think it's more important now. So more than ever is to realize that this is all a conversation about bodily autonomy and what these folks want to be viewed as acceptable and what is not acceptable. I guarantee it'll be more cisgender women harmed by these bathroom laws than trans women because, again, I know cis women who have been called man more times than I've ever been called. And that's just because our society constantly likes to question what they think is right for others. But I think that if folks start to just connect the dots and realize that truly being a light in someone's life, whether that be if you see someone in an abusive relationship or if you see someone struggling out there, just realize that we are community. And I know that sometimes it is hard to reach out to folks, but in this upcoming administration, we've been here. This is something that we will survive again. We've been here. We've been in this point. We've been in this position more often in history than we haven't. So, I'm this fight is nothing new. But what I do think is different is that we're struggling to get back to community oriented solutions, especially after COVID. So I want us to start thinking of our community and each other as the ones who will get us through this current administration. So whether that looked like calling a friend and saying, "Hey, how are you?" or whether that looked like I know sometimes for me it's been nice for a friend to just get me out of the house or something like that. Hey, I haven't seen you for a while. Can I do something for you? I think that's really what's going to be instrumental in trans folks' survival is seeing that we do have friends out there because it does feel alone right now. It can feel like you're on an island. But when I'm on my island, I reach out to my community, and I'm blessed to have that. But a lot of others don't have that in community, and I think we can all get back to that.
I agree 100%. And that's something that one of the reasons we did start Queerolina. It's one of the reasons that it's just been so echoed through every interview that we've done so far. Everybody has said something very similar, and it's just so true, especially in, I mean, the trans community as well, like more than ever. It's just remembering that we all do have each other, and like, you know, to lean on each other and support each other in these times instead of, you know, fighting or like trying to compete, which often I feel like happens, you know, in our communities. And it's really at the moment that we're at, we need to realize that, yeah, we have to lean on each other. So
yeah, and I'm also going to expand on that a little bit and say, like, I think if you have a strong community in yourself, like if you're like, you know what, I have the besties, I have this group that like we always check in on each other, then challenge yourself to look at another minority that needs some help. Look at that elderly person that lives next door that you know only leaves their house once a week. Like, go take them out to lunch sometime, or like if you can't afford lunch, go on a walk with them, get them out of the house. Like, it's so important, I think, like, to, like, Koee and I've talked about a billion times in every single podcast, but like bridge that gap between, like, there are more similarities in us than there are differences. And so it's like, what somebody's going through, you don't know what's going on inside their brain, inside their body. The fact that there are chronic illnesses out there that make it so that your disability is like invisible. It's like, okay, that person needs help too. So if we can like step out of our comfort zones and be like, well, I have my community, we're safe, we're good, then figure out who doesn't have one and help them find one, or be that person they need.
I also think confrontation is okay. I also think in this newer generation, people are really terrified of confrontation. They're like, oh, I think we also need to learn how to thrive in confrontation. You can't just cut off everyone.
Yeah.
Because then you are alone. As a person who did cut off everyone, it's not cute. So I think in this world, like, a little confrontation is okay. I mean, obviously, if y'all beating each other's ass, like, that's not cute. But if it can be worked out by just saying, "Hey, girl, hey, I heard this. I just want to confirm." You know, I think that's all it is. I could think 9 times out of 10, anytime I've had any type of drag related conflict, it never needed to be or any type of conflict in entertainment in general, it never needed to be a whole, unless it needed to be a thing. now there are times for it to be a thing, but when it comes to individuals, I'll say that, not corporations, individuals, not corporations. I always prioritize individuals and their well-being over a corporation. A corporation I don't give a fuck about. But when it comes to individuals, I think 9 times out of 10, like, if you heard somebody say your drag look cheap, be like, "Hey, sister, that wasn't nice, but okay." Maybe that was your version of reality, and maybe I did look cheap that night, because there have been some nights where someone called me cheap, and I did look cheap. I looked back and I was like, I wanted to be offended about it, and I went back and I said, "Oh, I did look cheap." And sometimes cheap is called for, okay? But I think confrontation is natural. We got to stop being so at each other, unless somebody is calling you a slur or something like that, and it really calls for an ass whooping.
But I also feel like whenever we get to that point, then if we've been conversational up to that point, if we're not like getting angry at the drop of a hat, if we're actually like, "Hey, you know what? You said this thing, it really upset me. Can we have a conversation about it?" Or like, "You know, I saw you did that thing. This is why I don't feel like that's an okay thing. Like, let's have that conversation." Then whenever you do flip that switch and say, "That was out of fucking line," then they'll actually take you more seriously and be like, "Whoa, I actually like," instead of like, "Well, you always get upset." Okay, well, maybe I do, but also maybe you're fucking wrong, you know, like, so maybe being able to be calmer in those times when you are uncomfortable at first, and I know it's really hard, but being able to be like, this pissed me off, but like, be calm about it, then it'll make more of an impact later.
Exactly. Like, whenever my mom gets pissed at me, she always tells me why. I may not agree with it, but
I would much rather have an explanation than just be like, crickets. Like, please let me know what's going on.
Yeah, if you're gonna call me cheap, at least let me know why you call me cheap. Like, maybe we can do something about it. Or if you call me ugly, at least let me know why you think I'm ugly. Maybe we could do something about it. You know, maybe.
Well, as we're hitting this hour mark, I just wanted to say it was lovely sitting down with you.
Megan's questions.
Yes, I wasn't going to forget her question.
I almost did.
We don't normally have a third, but her partner and her most likely have the flu right now. And so she's a chef. So her questions are usually food related. So at the end here, we want to have a little podcast where we do a little callback, maybe cook your favorite meals. So on that, what is your favorite meal?
Yes, if y'all not allergic to seafood, I'll eat a seafood down. My boss was picking on me. She was like, "You get food poisoning every time you eat crab legs," and I was like, "How you know that?" And she was like, "Cause you call it at work every time you eat crab legs," and I was like, "Get out my tea, girl."
So would you say, like, when you say seafood, are you like a seafood boil? Is it like crab legs? What's your go-to?
I love a crab cake. Oh my god, or a salmon cake, or a salmon patty. Those are so good. Oh my gosh.
Crab cake.
I love a crab cake. I could eat a crab cake for days. Ooh, they're so good.
And the second question is, what is your favorite way to have a potato?
A potato? Oh my gosh. See, I don't know. But see, I don't know if I grew up on potatoes like that. Like, I got a whole thing of potatoes in my feet, and they growing shit out of them, and I'm like, oh my god. I just don't know what to do with potato. I know you can make soup with them and all that stuff. I do like a baked potato though, with the bacon and the chives and the cream cheese and the butter. When it's done up right, like I say, look, I say I can do all things until it comes to like preparing like simple foods like that, like tortillas and anything that requires like something like that, tortillas and potatoes and stuff like that. I can't do that shit. Like somebody else do it. But
at least you're honest about it.
Yeah, I'm like putting like people. I know people get excited about like the little potato bars or whatever like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I get to put all this shit in it. First of all, how do you put like I see other people do it, and I'm like, how did you put all that shit in there? First of all. Because my shit looks like it's always it look like it's always busted and overflowing. Like it look like it done got a train ran on it. Yours is looking immaculate. Mine is looking like a train. So, but I do like a baked potato. I do like a baked potato.
Word. So crab cake, baked potato. It is.
Not mad about it.
I'm not mad about it. That sounds good.
Right.
So, as we're rounding out, is there anything else that you wanted to add? Anything else you felt you wanted to say, or
no? Other than Cowboy, look, if y'all could understand the battle I went through for Cowboy Carter tickets today.
Oh my god, yeah, those did launch.
Babe, I feel like I ran to the West Coast and back. That was a battle. Like it involved 2 hours, a nap, a headache, lots of weed. Like Beyonce wore my ass out today, so Cowboy Carter, that better be a good ass tour.
Honestly.
Do you have any socials that you'd like to plug? Do you have any socials you'd like to plug?
Oh, just my Instagram. It's Alex the Rabbit, like Megan the Stallion, but it's a little rabbit.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's ALEXTHEERABBITT.
Two B's, RABBIT. Thank y'all so much for allowing me this opportunity. I always feel like so out of touch with like younger folks in communities. So I feel like this is a really great opportunity to do that. And I appreciate like just being, I call myself a queer historian. So
that's okay. We're like the same age. So
I've seen a lot of girls come up and go, and I've never seen them do something like this in this area. So I'm really appreciative of y'all doing that. And
thank you.
I really appreciate.
I hope this is like a way that we can like archive like more North Carolinians. Yeah.
100%, like, and giving that light to the drag community and the queer community as a whole, and hopefully we can even get into like more ballroom stuff as well, and like.
Oh, we are. I am having a ball, actually. It's someday in March.
Well,
You know how people do that stagger promotion. Look, I done forgot the original date. I think it's like the 28th or something like that. But I don't want to misquote myself. So we just gonna say March, baby, the end of March. Thank you so much. Thank y'all so much for interviewing me. It was lovely. Also, your Powerpuff Girls shirt is the most amazing thing I've seen in a long time. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, this was amazing. It was so good to get to know you better.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you.
Just chit chat.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Queer Vision Pod. Once again, I am Koee Starr, or Koee of Kanekalon, and this is...
I'm Becca.
We're the co-founders of Queerlina and the Queer Vision. Please feel free to read this article of Alexandria Webb's interview on the Queer Vision Volume 1, Issue 2. It's past 7 p.m. My brain doesn't work anymore.
It's okay.
Thank you all so much for watching. You can find us at queerlina.org on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, TikTok. I always forget TikTok these days. And you can also find Alex the Rabbit at ALEXRABBIT. I think there were 2 E's. It's going to be on the screen.
Or it'll be on
the audio.
page.
It will be on the page. It'll be in the show notes. Please look at the show notes. Anyway, yes.
You'll find it. And then you should go to the ball to support their ball.
Yes. If you are in the ballroom scene, Alex will be putting on a ball. And we will have all that in the show notes as well as on our Instagram and in the physical document.
So basically everywhere.
So everywhere. Thank you all so much for watching. We've been in this room for too long.
Oh, goodbye. Also, wait. You should come to Down to Earth, where we have a community space, and come hang out.
A community space? Never heard of that. No. Yes. If you are in the Smithfield area, we do have a space now, which we're filming from. Down to Earth.
We're filming from the floor corner.
The floor corner where you could come and sit and drink a coffee, or
with this table, or
you could read a book.
Yeah, and there's
or
a
chat with friends and play Uno.
We have a take one leave one book exchange.
Yeah.
There's a little library here that we haven't filled up yet. We will by the time you're here.
It's fun. It's fun over here.
You should. It's great. And there's crystals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.